And now on to our discussion. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman last week announced several financial measures to boost the economy that has been battered by the COVID-19 pandemic. In total, a stimulus package worth 6.3 lakh crore rupees was announced by the Finance Minister. The announcements are likely to help several COVID-affected sectors, businesses, and even individuals. Sitharaman also said that the interest rate applicable under the new credit guarantee scheme will be 2% below the Reserve Bank of India's prescribed rates, with a loan duration of 3 years. Industry leaders and economists are not fully convinced that the fresh economic relief measures announced by the finance minister would help in significantly boosting the COVID-battered economy. They say that the new loan guarantees and higher cap for the emergency credit line guarantee scheme will provide temporary relief but will fall short of boosting economic growth over a longer period. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the COVID-19 economic stimulus package announced by the Finance Minister. Joining me on the program today are Mohan Guruswamy, Chairman and Founder, Center for Policy Alternatives and former advisor to the Finance of India. Also with me on the program, Ajay Shankar, former Secretary, Government of India, and Vineeta Hariharan, public policy expert who is leading Government of India missions. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. All right, Vineeta Hariharan, let me start the program with you first. Let's first try and understand and analyze, the stimulus package. What does it mean? What are the sectors that it focuses on, and how is it going to help the economy in these troubled times?
Definitely. Thank you, Frank, for having me over again. The stimulus package is an extension of the old stimulus package, of the massive stimulus package in the phase one, which was 20 lakh crore, which is almost 10% of the GDP. So this time it's 6 lakh 28,000 crore. And I believe it's a very well calibrated and measured response to the second COVID-19 attack. And it's been done after a lot of consultation with the relevant stakeholders. And it covers a gamut of sectors while giving loan guarantees to the COVID-affected sectors of the MSME and the much-needed tourism sector. It also gives a substantial subsidy element also to where it is required by welfare goods, for the welfare goods like fertilizers and the PM Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, as well as the public health programs for pediatric care. So I think the subsidies and the loan guarantees have been well distributed where it is required, because the general critique is that, why give loans and not give grants to MSMEs and COVID affected businesses. But then you don't have the business to be in business if you can't run a business. So therefore, this is a pandemic kind of infused proofing that's been given to the banks, so that because to allay their concerns over the mounting NPAs which they anticipated while giving loans to various small borrowers and MSMEs. So therefore, that has been allayed, and the government is actually leveraging on the high capital adequacy that's available with the banks at the moment. So I think it's a very well studied and well calibrated response to the second COVID-19 pandemic. And we should also remember that, of course, it was a very intense attack which took the whole globe by storm, the Delta variant that we experienced. But at the same time, the lockdowns, where we have learned from the past without having intense lockdowns, we've had micro containment measures. So therefore, the impact on the economy has not been as much as it was in the last year. And so I think the response has been adequate, and also it's over and above the 34 lakh budget announcement that happened recently in 21-22, which also has a slew of welfare measures for various across the gamut of the development sector.
Absolutely. All right. As the government is concerned, what are some of the constraints? Also, how much of hand holding can the government do at a point like this? Because there are fiscal constraints at the end of the day. So how can we strike a balance really between the two?
Yes. I think the measures that have been taken now, the second stimulus, or if you don't want to call it a stimulus, or the response package that the government has designed, is it's a tightrope kind of a balanced approach, I would say, without neglecting the have-nots, also giving stimulus or giving impetus to the growing economies or the growing sectors of MSMEs and other COVID affected sectors like tourism. So I think it's a well balanced approach to a response measure that such a challenged and diverse country like ours can possibly give. We cannot compare ourselves with advanced economies of the world like Germany, which has given huge fiscal stimulus, as we understand. So taking cognizance of our varied structure and the federal structure, the cooperative federal structure in which we function, diverse states and different micro canvases within the country. This is the best, I think, stimulus or a response package that the government could have designed. And we also have like mentioned, we also have challenges of the fiscal roadmap. We need to get our deficit down to 4.5%, and we also have a debt of almost 90% of our GDP. We're going to our debt to GDP ratio of almost 90%, which is worrisome. Therefore, the government has to take in various factors into account. So the best thing that we could do at the moment is leverage on the, like I mentioned, the liquidity available with banks. And therefore, as a policy, as a macro level central government response, I think this is more than adequate. Also considering the various welfare schemes that the government has in various sectors, from you name it and you have a welfare scheme in place with huge budget provisions. So I think the government of the day has done enough in terms of budget announcements, also a large thrust in infrastructure investments. So now the job ahead is to get these programs, functioning, get them implemented well in the state government. So a large responsibility also lies with the state governments to implement the public programs, the central government and centrally sponsored schemes that the ministry or the central government is providing to the states, and also improve their GST collections, and also look at widening their revenues, resource revenues, not just depend on the central government for transfers, but also look at widening their own resource revenues, because there's a huge devolution of funds even through the 15th Finance Commission and through the public programs. So the challenge ahead lies in implementing these programs in a fast-paced manner. The responsibility lies equally with the central government, as well as with a large responsibility lies with the state governments to take these programs to the last mile and to help the beneficiaries to access these loans that are being given by the banks. That's the last mile hitch that is there in the country today. Although we are moving towards digital platforms and getting the databases on the national portal, getting the informal sector onto the formal sector, there's a lot of measures for that. Formalization of micro enterprises is a big, huge 10,000 crore program announced by the Food Processing Ministry to get informal micro food enterprises into the formal sector. And even the latest measure of supporting the lending to the microfinance to the small ticket borrowers. That's a huge step in supporting the MFIs, which has a huge market as far as the small borrowers are concerned. And it also gives a provision for controlling the interest rates that the MFIs were charging 24% in previously, but now there's a cap that's been given by the RBI. So that way, I think it's a very well balanced and structured response. And we need to really work on getting the last mile strengthened in terms of devolving these funds and ensuring that the last mile beneficiary gets best use of these public programs.
Right. To get quick closing comments now from all the panelists with the best way forward, starting first with you, Vineeta Hariharan.
Macroeconomic indicators are important to take cognizance of, because fiscal deficit plays an important role in also getting our ratings right. And without ratings, we don't get FDI into our country. So that's very important to have a sight on that. So therefore, we need to, like I mentioned, we need to do a tightrope with more than enough welfare measures being announced and also being implemented by the government. There is also a lot of packages for just confirming to what Ajay Shankarji just said about improving infrastructure for MSMEs. There are also programs for that, for plant and machinery and for equipment. So for working capital, the best way is to go to give guarantees to banks to onward lending to MSMEs. So therefore, that way the government of the day is doing the right job by balancing both aspects. And in terms of the inflation worries, I think we've already had a discussion recently on big picture when we talked about how we control the fuel prices and how do we address that issue. So that is again getting into GST regime. The states have to agree to get into GST. the short run and long run, like Ajay Shankarji just mentioned, getting into electric and alternate modes of transport and greener modes of development, urban development. So those are some aspects that we need to take into account. And as far as taking forward these packages, these are just, these are catalysts, so to speak. So the individual ministries and the individual sectors have to take these forward. For example, tourism, there's a lot of need for branding and marketing. So it's up to the Ministry of Tourism to have stakeholder discussions with various the stakeholders in the tourism sector and see how they can improve the particular sector. So I think, yeah, that's about it.
All right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, what's coming out of this discussion is that the stimulus package is welcome and a step in the right direction. However, there is a lot more that needs to be done. These are unprecedented times and calls for strong measures. We have to continue all that we can on the policy front and spur up the economy. Once we focus on the GDP, all other issues can be addressed. The big concern is the third wave of the pandemic and how severe it may be. That will have a massive impact on the economy.